So welcome everyone to tonight's Dharma Talk at Mountain Cloud. Late yesterday with the talk, this talk, barely on the horizon, I sent a title and short blurb to Abby to post on the website. Better late than never. Sometimes these descriptions end up guiding what comes, sort of helpful prod. Here's what went up for today. In this talk, Valerie will take up the poetry of love and loss as a portal to a saying from the eminent 9th century master Joshu, Zhaozhou, about the timelessness of our everyday lives. The talk will explore Joshu's reply to a monk who asks, during the 24 hours, how is the mind put to use? Joshu offers a response that calls us into the immeasurable dynamism of each present moment. The description goes on. We are creatures inured to the measure of time. What happens when, in a moment of zazen, time stands still? Or all time is suddenly nothing but now. So I gave the talk the title, The Humanity of Our Life in a Borderless Now. That was yesterday. This morning I woke early to see what would come. These Thursdays are really a beautiful practice. And then at the top of my email was a message from a student, someone long committed to practice who experienced a powerful awakening just a few months ago. I'd like to share the email, and this is with permission. Here's that short message. Sitting here for the starving children in Palestine, we can't go on. We will go on. Is sitting, praying, asking for deliverance for who, from whom, just sitting? Does it really draw the world into the sit? Is everything just so? Or is that a delusion, a comfort to us that by doing nothing we are doing something? I may take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, but does my refuge shelter the starving from hunger, bullets, and bombs? Will there ever be an end to the question marks? Is sitting an end to question marks? Very honest, coming out of this sitting. The cry, the longing, the fierce compassion. It calls up the first line of the 4 vows of the Bodhisattva, vows we chant each time we sit together. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Or some versions, I vow to save them all. Mission impossible, my root teacher Reuben used to say. And yet, that line, that vow, doesn't end with a question mark. It's more like an exclamation point, an endless task, and already so. So what to say? What would you say? Is sitting, is zazen an end to question marks? One response on an ordinary level is to note how this sitting helps us get up off the cushion or bench or chair and find what's ours to do. Or from a much wider view, the koan tradition tells us it's not enough to sit on top of the 100-foot pole. The masters say, you must take a step forward off the pole and manifest your whole body in the 10 directions. This one all-pervading body, whole, excluding nothing. One step. Still the question, just sitting. Does it really draw the whole world into the sit? Does the refuge of our sitting matter to the wider world? Every now and then I quote this passage from our abbot Rian Roshi because it's so clear and vital, and a response from him, at least, out of his practice, some 70 years of practice. He said, when you are sitting, actually the whole universe is sitting. Your zazen is actually the manifestation of the whole universe doing zazen. Therefore, when you are doing zazen, those effects, those merits, extend without exception throughout the whole universe. I know you will say that is unbelievable. I myself did not believe it, but now I have not the slightest doubt about it. So how to arrive at that confidence about this practice, even in the midst of all our questions, our longings and lament, nothing excluded. So let's turn now to time and the monk's question to Joshu. During the 24 hours, the monk asks, how is mind put to use? As promised in the description, here's one take on it. A poem by the American mid-20th century poet James Wright. He called it Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Here's the poem. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk, blowing like a leaf in green shadow. Down the ravine behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between two pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over, looking for home. I have wasted my life. I Googled this poem by the last line. And what about that? Is it an expression of regret? Or of thanksgiving? For beauty? For seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary for one moment? At our Zazen Kai last Saturday, our day of Zen, I offered a short tribute to Andrea Gibson. Gibson was a poet laureate of Colorado and a wildly gifted spoken word artist. They died last week after 4 years of living with cancer. Andrea was 49. Sometime during that last year, when the pain came on, Gibson saw the resistance to that pain and decided, they said, to let it go. As they put it, everything became possible. And with it, the realization, this is their language, there is so much more time in a moment than in a decade. You know, friends, loved ones must have been saying, it's too soon, not enough time. More time in a moment than any amount of time. This moment. What is this? Here's another way of putting that question. The full exchange from the sayings of Joshu. A monk asked Joshu, during the 24 hours, how is mind put to use? Joshu said, you are being used by the 24 hours, while this old monk is using the 24 hours. Which of these times are you talking about? That is old Joshu, lived to be 120. Joshu, teaching, after 40 years of study of life with Nansen and 20 years of pilgrimage, Joshu finally settled down in a tiny temple with fewer than 30 monks, this great master. Meager provisions, thin soup, sometimes no tea, according to the sayings. Sometimes barely enough to survive. This old monk is using the 24 hours. standing, sitting, listening. We can hear the echo of ordinary mind is the way, coming from Joshu's marrow. Ordinary mind freely using the 24 hours. And we can hear nonsense turning word to Joshu, now addressed to us. When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament. How can it be talked about on the level of right and wrong? The way, this way, human, and at the same time, vast and boundless. The great empty firmament is using the 24 hours. How to describe it? Nothing there. No one doing anything, and everything included. Back in the 70s, when the Insight Meditation Center, IMS, built their retreat house, their center, they were looking around for a motto. And one suggestion that came up, it is better to do nothing than to waste your time. They didn't go with that, but it resounded. We often hear the invitation in sitting to do as little as possible. How? Don't let yourself be used by time. Why? Because time isn't like that. Eihei Dogen, it's amazing, prolific, clear, 13th century master, famously wrote about time in his masterpiece, Shobo Genso, this chapter called Uji, or Being Time, or sometimes translated the Time Being. Time isn't some measure that comes and goes, passes and runs out. If there's anything like time, Dogen explains, if there's anything like time, it's what you are. This is time. This one moment. Even this mat, this table, this computer, this sound. And there's no beginning or end. You can check it out. There's no edge. Look into your sitting. It doesn't hold up. Dogen writes, time itself is being, and all being is time. Each moment is all being. Each moment is the entire world. Reflect now, he writes, whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. What does that mean for Gaza, or 33 war zones, for the planet, or for us? Might it signal refuge beyond anything we can imagine. And simultaneously, a call to action. Compassionate action. Because compassion is what this is. Nothing left out. Dogen has another lesser known chapter in the Shobogenzo that turns toward time with a laser focus. And the title of that chapter, interestingly, is Arousing the Aspiration for Enlightenment. That might sound like a gaining idea, but no, there's nobody there to gain anything. Here is Dogen's description. Arousing the aspiration for enlightenment is making a vow to bring all sentient beings to the shore of enlightenment, to this shore, before you bring yourself. Making that vow and actualizing the vow. This is about compassion, inseparability, and for Dogen, it's about time. The moment at hand. So just a sentence later, Dogen writes, this aspiration is neither originally existent, nor does it emerge all of a sudden. It is neither one nor many. It is neither spontaneous nor formed gradually. This aspiration is not in yourself, nor are you in it. Sorry, Dogen is dense, and this is translation. Reading this, it called up his description elsewhere of sincerity, this quality. You know, the monks keep coming in all earnestness, in all sincerity, like this monk to Joshu, asking. And Dogen says, there is such a thing as sincerity, but it's not in the realm of the personal. It's not something we have like an attribute, it's what you are. Just a few weeks ago in one of these talks, maybe it was the Zazen, don't remember, I read a little passage from a book by Nelson Foster called The Storehouse of Treasures. He's got a chapter on integrity. He said, the moment one becomes completely sincere, completely, it's impossible not to awaken. Be what you are. So what does this have to do with time? For Dogen, you get the drift. Time is nothing but this very moment. He uses a Sanskrit word for moment. Some translators don't even translate it. They just leave kasana, this placeholder moment. A moment beyond measure. The sutras tell us we can't comprehend the speed with which our lives arise and pass away. Not just moment to moment coming and going, but already gone. Always already gone. Buddha talks about that's too slow. Or in one sutra, a follower comes up and asks the Buddha, to say something about this kasana, about this, and Buddha says, if I tried to explain it, you wouldn't be able to get it. And the student says, well, is there an allegory? And so the Buddha says, okay, yes. Suppose there are 4 archers, expert archers, and they're back to back with each other. So each one pointing in the 4 directions, And suppose they release the bow, the arrow, simultaneously. And suppose there's an elite runner standing there who runs around and catches all 4 bows before they hit the ground. That's not fast enough. That doesn't come close, Buddha says, to the speed of this arising, vanishing, arising, vanishing. Even the word speed, tempo, doesn't hold up. Dogen links the realization of this constant change, not just to awakening, but to compassion. Joshu says to his monks, you are being used by the 24 hours. This old monk is using the 24 hours. Joshu is living in this ksana world. And actually, so are we. There is no other. So what are we to do in this fleeting beyond fast moment of war and hunger and organized cruelty and uncharted uncertainty, however we name it? Of course, also the kindness, the joy, the fact of being alive. Here's how one 13th century master put it on the heels of his awakening. It's very short. Shooting with a broken bow. The bow is shattered, arrows are all gone. At this critical moment, cast aside all doubt. Shoot without the slightest delay. A week ago, last Monday, I flew back to Fort Worth, Texas, a pilgrimage of sorts, to the place and community where, I don't know, some years ago, speaking of time, I earned 2 graduate degrees and then stayed on to work as associate dean in that same grad school. My mentor and dissertation director, Dr. Toni Craven. She was a highly respected scholar, a remarkable human being, a progressive Catholic feminist, a defender of humanity, especially humanity on the margins. And she died through this long, rich life about a month ago. Her daughter, adopted as a young adult, invited a small group of people who had been close to Toni to participate in the memorial service. For a moment, I got this invitation and thought, I can't go, I can't leave, there's too much going on, mountain cloud. And then just, yes, of course. Just do it. What is it? Using the 24 hours. So in the course of those just really 2 days, heightened days, a line from Psalm 90, which had been the core text for my dissertation, this line kept coming to mind. I've mentioned it. The line is, "Teach us to count our days truly, that we might bring forth a heart of wisdom." How are we to do that? To count our days truly. Maybe it was at the zazen I mentioned that back then the count was 1, 1, 1. Now, spending time with Dogen again, I want to say, already gone. Constantly changing. This very moment. 1 and 0. I'm going to close with a short Dharma Hall discourse from Dogen. So he would have been speaking to his monks for much less time than this. It's called Monks' Bowls Open Their Mouths. Dogen says, "I can remember once a monk asked Joshu, 'How can we use our mind throughout the 24 hours?' And Joshu said, 'You are used by the 24 hours. This old monk uses the 24 hours. Which time are you asking about?' The teacher Dogen said," this is Dogen speaking, "Although Joshu said it is this way, how is it for me?" He names himself, "having arrived at this point." And here's how Dogen puts it. "You are used by the 24 hours, but I allow that you understand the ancestral teacher Zen." In other words, this inherited practice. "This old monk, Joshu, can use the 24 hours, so I allow that the old monk understands Tathagata Zen, this gone beyond Zen, this full realization. This is the reality of going beyond Buddhas and ancestors. What is the reality within the house of Buddha ancestors?" Dogen's saying, right here, what's going on? After a pause, Dogen said, "The monks' bowls open their mouths and eat rice." Such an intimate world, so dynamic, so near, and full of humor. So what happens when the reality of the world shows itself in and as that one body? Or when the pain of the world imbues our hearts with lament, maybe even a sense of futility. Or when the distance between you and other dissolves. And wherever you turn, it's your own true face. Not the slightest gap. Will there ever be an end to question marks? Is this sitting an end to question marks? An end or a beginning? Or just the humanity of our life in a borderless now? Thank you all for this shared practice.